I think probably most of you here today, most of you, not all of you, but most of you were around, and you probably remember when the Mel Gibson movie came out, The Passion of Christ. It was somewhat controversial in churches, I think, but you probably remember that. Well, some pastors were actually describing it as, quote, the greatest evangelistic tool that has ever been in the history of the church. Sinclair Ferguson made the point that when somebody says something like that, they're actually showing that they don't know very much about the history of the church. Why is that? Because the greatest evangelistic tool that has ever been in the entire history of the church is the church. A healthy, loving, unified, well-ordered, Spirit-filled, Christ-centered community of believers. That, my dear friends, is the best and the most effective program for evangelism. When I was reading through the book of Acts, or when you've been reading through the book of Acts, we've all probably read through, many of us a number of times, at least many of us have. Have you ever noticed that one of the things that Luke does in his account is he'll back up from time to time, and he'll give us this little short description of the climate of the churches, what was happening in the churches, and little snapshots and summaries of the spiritual life of the churches. And he'll give a description like this, and then he'll end by saying something like this, and the Lord was adding to them, or and they were multiplied, or something like that. He keeps making this connection in the book of Acts between the healthy state of the churches and the evangelistic impact of those churches. We see it, for example, back in chapter 2 of Acts, after giving this description of the healthy life of the church, their devotion to the apostles' teaching, their fellowship, breaking of bread and prayers, their love for one another, and so on. He then adds, and the Lord added to the church daily those who were being saved. We have one of these snapshots in Acts 9:31, where we read, then the churches throughout Judea, Galilee, and Samaria had peace and were edified, and walking in the fear of the Lord and the comfort of the Holy Spirit, they were multiplied. We see it again, this connection between healthy churches, healthy church life, and multiplication. We have several examples of this throughout the book of Acts. And we see the same thing in our opening passage as we return to this passage again this morning. After these unnamed believers came to Antioch, because of the persecution being scattered abroad, they came there and they were sharing the gospel, and a great number believed, and the church in Jerusalem hears about it, and they send Barnabas up there to check things out. He gathers them together, he encourages them and teaches them. Later he hunts down Saul to help him in the work, and a church is planted there, a healthy body of believers that was again devoted to the Word, as we've seen, and to Christ and to one another. And what else was happening in that kind of context and climate? The end of verse 24. And a great many people were added to the Lord. So, you see, we keep seeing this connection. Healthy church life and a great many people added to the Lord. You see, evangelism does not so much produce life in a church as it is life in a church produces evangelism. And why is that? What exactly is the connection? Well, it seems to me the connection is at least twofold. Two things. First of all, a healthy church is the most powerful apologetic for the gospel. Jesus himself tells us this. You remember his prayer in John chapter 17, verses 20 to 21. He prays for his apostles and for all those who shall believe through their word. That's us. And he prays that they all may be one, as you, Father, are in me and I in you, that they all may be one in us, that, or in order that, the world may believe that you sent me. So Jesus says one of the ways sinners are brought to believe the message of the gospel is by beholding the unity of God's people. And where is unity actually seen and demonstrated? It's in the fellowship of a healthy church. The connection, it seems, is this. In a world that's full of strife, a world that's full of broken relationships, supernatural, gospel-produced unity made visible in a healthy, loving church family bears powerful witness to the truth of the gospel. And there's no more powerful apologetic for the gospel than that. You remember Jesus also said, they will know that you are my disciples if you have love for one another. Well, where does the world see Christians loving one another? Well, not as isolated individuals engaging in personal evangelism, though there's nothing wrong certainly with personal evangelism, but they see Christians loving one another when Christians are sharing life with one another as part of a church. Secondly, I think one reason for this connection, and this is all introduction, but it not only is a healthy church the most powerful apologetic for evangelism, evangelism is the natural, or perhaps I should say the supernatural outgrowth and overflow of a healthy church. Because a healthy church produces healthy Christians. And healthy Christians will love people. And they'll have a burden for the lost. They'll love the gospel. They'll love Christ. They'll long to see Christ glorified in the salvation of sinners. As Jesus said, out of the overflow of the heart, the mouth speaks. So it's not just about developing some kind of great, new evangelism program. It's healthy. It's the cultivating of healthy churches and healthy church life. If we desire to see effective evangelism and missions happening through our churches, where does it begin? How do we pursue it? Well, pastors and church leaders must make it their aim to cultivate healthy Christians and healthy church life and to plant healthy churches. And what does that look like? Well, this brings us back to this short series of messages that we've been in for the last several weeks.